AITA for refusing to pay my ex's debt after she left me for her true love? My name is Jacob. I'm 29 years old, and I own a small local diner. It isn't an elegant or luxurious place, nothing like that. But for me, it has enormous value. Everything I have achieved in life has been thanks to my own effort. For years I worked in kitchens that weren't mine, pulling long and exhausting shifts, saving every dollar I could. There were many sacrifices and many hours of work, but over time I finally managed to gather enough to open my own business. Little by little, the diner started to grow. Every week more customers arrived, and some of them began to come frequently until they became regulars. As time passed, the people in the neighborhood started to recognize me. Today I can say that I make a living from something I truly enjoy doing. Thanks to all that work, I was also able to buy a car and a house for myself. It isn't a mansion or anything impressive, but it's comfortable and enough for my life. I've never been a person who chases luxury. I'm a hardworking person who feels satisfied when he sees his effort yield results. It was exactly at that moment in my life, when everything seemed to be on the right track, that Madison appeared. She was 25 years old at the time. I wasn't looking for a serious relationship because my mind was almost always occupied with the diner. But sometimes life has its own way of surprising us. I remember perfectly the day I saw her for the first time. It was a Friday afternoon, and the diner was full of customers. We were short-staffed that day, so I was helping at the register myself when she walked in. She ordered her food with a shy smile. I couldn't explain exactly what it was, but something in the way she looked at me immediately caught my attention. While we were talking, she asked me if the diner belonged to me. When I said yes, she seemed genuinely surprised and congratulated me for having achieved something like that. The conversation ended up lasting longer than normal for a simple order. After that day, we started seeing each other more frequently. At first, everything was exciting. I felt that mix of nerves and enthusiasm that appears when a relationship is beginning. Madison was very affectionate with me. She always had thoughtful gestures and found ways to make me feel important. As the months passed, our relationship became more serious and we finally started dating exclusively. However, over time I began to notice some aspects of her character that I didn't see so clearly before. Madison was quite jealous and, at times, also very moody. If she saw me talking to a female customer, even when I was simply working, she would get uncomfortable. If someone left a comment on my social media, she immediately wanted to know who that person was and why they were writing to me. At that time, I didn't give it too much importance. I thought maybe that jealousy was a way of showing how much she cared about the relationship. I was in love, so instead of setting boundaries, I preferred to ignore those signs and move forward. Over time, those attitudes began to repeat themselves more and more. We ended up arguing over small things or situations that really didn't matter. There were days when Madison was sweet and calm with me, but suddenly her mood would change without a clear reason. Some days she would tell me that I was the most important thing in her life, but at other times she seemed to doubt everything. I tried to justify her changes by thinking that maybe she had insecurities or had lived through difficult experiences before meeting me. My mistake was thinking that love alone could solve any problem. The truth is that I was deeply in love. In my mind, our relationship had a clear future. I imagined that we could overcome any obstacle together. I had even thought about marrying her someday and starting a family. I always included her in my plans and was convinced that she felt the same way about me. But a few months ago, something started to change. Madison began to behave in a different way. She was more distant and seemed distracted almost all the time, as if her mind were somewhere else. Every time I asked her what was wrong, she would answer that she was tired or had some personal problems. I tried not to pressure her too much, but little by little her coldness began to affect me. Arguments became more frequent, and those uncomfortable silences that didn't exist before started to become part of our daily routine. I'm not a particularly suspicious person, but something inside me started to feel uneasy. It was a hard feeling to explain, like an intuition telling me there was something she wasn't telling me. One day, something happened that made me think even more. Madison was in the bathroom, and she left her phone on the table. Suddenly, it vibrated. I never check anyone's phone, but right at that moment the screen lit up and a notification appeared from a number that wasn't saved in her contacts. The message said, "See you tomorrow. I can't stop thinking about you." At that instant, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The first thing I tried to think was that maybe it was a mistake or some joke from a friend, but deep down I had the feeling that the reality was different. Even so, I decided not to say anything at that moment. The next day I woke up early and made a decision I honestly am not proud of, but I needed to know the truth. I decided to follow her. Madison told me she was going to visit a friend. However, instead of going to that house, I saw her walk into a coffee shop. I parked my car at a distance and watched from afar. A few minutes later, a man arrived. At first, I didn't recognize him, but then I remembered that Madison had told me about her ex-boyfriend. When they met, they greeted each other with far too much familiarity. They hugged and started talking with the closeness of a couple. At that moment, I felt everything inside me collapse. Even so, a part of me wanted to believe that I was misinterpreting the situation, but what I had right before my eyes confirmed exactly what I feared most. Madison was cheating on me. I didn't approach them or make a scene. I just stood watching from a distance in silence, with a very strong mix of anger, sadness, and disappointment. After a few minutes, I decided to leave. I didn't have the strength to stay there or confront her at that moment. That same night, when she returned home, I decided I could no longer ignore what was happening. I sat down across from Madison and told her directly that I knew the truth. At first, she denied it as if nothing was happening, but when she saw that I was completely sure, she looked down. What she said next destroyed me even more. With tears in her eyes, she confessed that yes, she had been seeing her ex. But she also added something I will never forget. She told me that he was the true love of her life, and that even though she cared for me, she had never stopped loving him. Hearing those words was like feeling a direct stab to the heart. Up until that moment, I still believed that our relationship had a future and that somehow everything could be fixed. But right then I understood something very painful. To her, I had been little more than a replacement. Basically, I had taken the place of a temporary refuge while she remained emotionally tied to someone else. When I heard all that, I was left speechless. I didn't know how to react. I just looked at her in silence, trying to hold back my tears and process what was happening. Madison started asking me to try to understand her. She said she never planned for things to end like this, that she had simply started having feelings again for someone who, according to her, she had never managed to fully forget. I was completely devastated. 3 years of a relationship seemed to crumble in front of me in a matter of minutes. It was at that moment when I learned a very hard lesson. Love by itself means nothing if there is no honesty or respect involved, but unfortunately, what came next was even worse. For everything to be understood well, there is something important I must explain. Throughout our relationship, I was the one who covered most of the major expenses. It never bothered me to do it. For me, helping the person I love has always been a natural way to show affection. The problem was that over time, Madison got used to depending on me for practically everything. I paid for many household expenses, some weekend getaways we took from time to time, and even several debts she had before meeting me. Among those debts was the auto loan for the car she drove. When we first started dating, she told me she had bought that car with a loan, but that she was having trouble making the monthly payments. At that time, my diner was already doing quite well, so I thought I could help her without it affecting me too much. So I started paying her car note myself. In my mind, it was simply a gesture of support toward my partner, something normal when you love someone and care about their well-being. I never imagined that some time later, that same gesture would end up being used against me. A few weeks after our relationship ended, I was at the diner reviewing some business accounts when my phone started ringing. It was Madison. For a moment I hesitated whether to answer or not. I thought maybe she wanted to come by for some things she still had at the house, or to close some pending issue between us. In the end, I decided to answer. "Hello, Jacob," she said in a surprisingly normal tone, as if nothing serious had happened between us. "What do you need, Madison?" I replied with no intention of dragging out the conversation. "I was just calling to remind you that I got a notice that you haven't paid the car note yet. You should do it soon, because otherwise they will start charging late fees." For a few seconds, I was completely silent, trying to process what I had just heard. "Are you serious?" I finally said, letting out a nervous laugh. "Of course I am," she replied. "You know you were always the one who took care of that payment." At that moment, I felt my blood begin to boil. "Listen to me closely, Madison," I told her firmly. "You and I have absolutely nothing anymore. You lied to me. You cheated on me. And on top of that, you had the nerve to tell me that your ex is the love of your life. I have no reason to keep paying your debts. That car is yours, not mine. If you have a problem with the payments, figure it out yourself. After that, there was a rather awkward silence between the two of us. Then I hung up. I thought that with that conversation, everything would end there, but I was completely wrong. Over the next few days, she started calling and texting me constantly. She insisted that I should act like a man and that I couldn't ignore a responsibility that, according to her, I had accepted before. I decided to block her number, but that didn't help much because she always found another way to contact me. Sometimes she did it from different numbers, other times through different apps. I tried to ignore her as much as possible, but the situation got even more complicated when another person appeared in the story. Her ex, the same man she had cheated on me with. One day I saw several missed calls from an unknown number. At first I didn't answer, but they insisted so many times that I finally decided to answer to put an end to the matter. "Jacob?" asked a male voice. "Yes." "Who is speaking?" I replied. "I'm Tyler, Madison's partner." For a moment I thought I had heard wrong. This guy, whom Madison had told me still lived with his parents and had never done anything serious with his life, now had the nerve to call me. "And what the hell do you want?" I asked him directly. "Relax, man. I'm not looking for trouble," he said in a tone that sounded quite mocking. "I just want you to understand that it would only be fair for you to keep helping Madison. After all, she gave you 3 years of her life. 3 years of her youth that she's not getting back." I froze completely upon hearing that. "Excuse me," I replied, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Yeah, just like you hear it," he continued. "The least you could do is pay her at least a year of rent and finish covering what's left on the car. To you that means nothing. You have a diner that makes you good money." At that moment I exploded. "Listen to me closely, you fool," I told him bluntly. "During those 3 years I gave her absolutely everything. Stability, support, a home, and I even paid debts that weren't mine. Don't come telling me that I owe her anything. If anyone failed in this story, it was Madison." He tried to say something, but I didn't let him continue. "Do you know what your real problem is, Tyler?" I went on. "That you're a freeloader, a parasite who still depends on his parents and has never worked to get what's yours. And yet you have the nerve to demand that I keep supporting her, while you, who supposedly are the great love of her life, can't even buy her a coffee." On the other side of the line, there was total silence. I was already completely furious. "Why don't you pay for her car and her rent?" I added. "If you love her so much, then take responsibility." He said nothing. "Learn to earn things with your own effort, you freeloaders," I said before hanging up. The call ended at that moment, but the problem didn't disappear. During the following days, Madison continued sending me messages. Some said things like, "Jacob, be reasonable, don't leave me alone with this." Or, "If you ever truly loved me, keep your word and pay what is owed." But by then I already had something very clear in my mind. The time had come to set a definitive boundary. The issue was no longer just the money. It was a matter of respect. During our relationship, I had given too much. I offered her stability, opportunities, and a life that she probably wouldn't have had on her own at that time. And yet, she decided to betray me with someone who honestly didn't even seem to be on her level. The worst part of all was that she didn't even show any shame for what happened. On the contrary, she expected me to continue being some kind of financial savior while she built a new life with that guy. This whole situation opened my eyes all at once. I understood that sometimes there are people who not only take advantage of your love, but also of your generosity. And if you don't learn to set boundaries in time, you end up turning into something like an ATM, someone they go to both emotionally and financially. With every message that arrived on my phone, my decision grew firmer. I was not going to pay anything else. The car was her business, the rent too. And the new life she had decided to start with the supposed love of her life was equally her responsibility. I'm not a perfect person, but there is something I am very clear about. Everything I have achieved in my life has been based on hard work. No one ever showed up to pay my debts or to solve my problems. If she wanted to be with her ex, she had every right, but she also had to take charge of the consequences of her own decisions. With that idea in my head, I made a firm decision to cut off all contact. I blocked her on all social media and apps. I also set up my phone to automatically reject calls from unknown numbers. I even talked to the employees at the diner, and asked them that if Madison ever showed up there, not to let her in. I didn't do it to humiliate her or to create a scene. I did it because I needed to protect my peace of mind and take care of the business that had cost me so much effort to build. The first days after all that were very hard. I won't pretend otherwise. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and an enormous emptiness. I had dedicated several years of my life to someone who, in the end, had only ended up using me. However, as the weeks passed, I started looking at the situation more clearly. It still hurt to remember everything that happened, but I also understood that I had made the right decision. It made no sense to continue investing money or energy in the life of a person who had betrayed me and who also didn't even have the dignity to leave without demanding more. Update. After all that chaos, I thought that chapter of my life was already completely closed. I had blocked Madison everywhere, drawn my boundaries, and focused on moving forward with my work and my life. I thought that would be enough. But I was wrong. A couple of fairly quiet weeks went by. Then, on a random day, my phone rang again with an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment whether I should answer or not, but out of habit, I ended up picking up. To my surprise, it was Madison again. "Jacob, please, don't hang up on me," she said between sobs. From the very first instant, I was already tired of that whole situation. "What do you want now?" I replied coldly. "Please, help me at least with the car. I don't want the debt to keep growing. If we don't pay the installment this month, they're going to charge me interest, and I have no way to do it. I just need you to lend me some money." I stayed quiet for a few seconds. I found it incredible that she still had the nerve to ask me for money after everything that had happened. "Madison, I already explained this to you before," I finally told her. "That car is yours, not mine. Therefore, it's your responsibility. I am not going to pay absolutely anything." At that moment, she started crying even harder. "Jacob, please, try to understand me. I promised Tyler that you would take care of everything. I told him he didn't have to worry because you had always been there for me. I assured him we wouldn't lack anything because you have money, because you're rich." When I heard those words, I felt my blood boil. "Rich?" I replied with a laugh full of sarcasm. "Do you really think that owning a diner means being a millionaire? Do you have any idea how many hours I work every day so that business keeps running?" I took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not rich, Madison. Everything I have I got by working. No one gave me anything, nor did I get it with empty promises. If you really want to solve your financial problems, then look for a job." At that moment, I heard a strange noise on the call. Suddenly, another voice took the phone. It was Tyler. "Listen closely, pal," he said in a clearly threatening tone. "If you don't want anything to happen to your little diner, you better start cooperating." I felt a shiver run down my spine, but the anger was stronger. "Are you threatening me, you parasite?" I replied immediately. "Listen to me carefully. If you lay a finger on my diner, you're going straight to jail. I'm not afraid of you or anyone else." My voice now sounded completely firm. "You want money? Then go find a job like any decent person, because you are not getting a single cent out of me." And I hung up the call immediately. A few minutes later, the phone rang again, but this time I decided to ignore it. Later, I received a voicemail from Madison. "Please, Jacob," she said in tears. "Help me. I can't handle all this alone. It's too much money, and if you don't help me, Tyler is going to leave me, and I'm going to be left with no one to support me." I couldn't help letting out a laugh loaded with irony. Deep down, what she was admitting was quite clear. Her biggest fear was not the debt, but that guy would abandon her. Her whole plan always seemed to rely on living off of someone. First me, and now him. I decided to reply with a bit of sarcasm. I opened the photo gallery on my phone and looked for a video I had saved for a long time, the famous meme of Mr. Krabs playing the world's smallest violin. I sent it to her along with a short message. "This is the official anthem of your situation. Good luck with your great love and also with your debts." After sending it, I felt a kind of relief, as if I had finally said what I had been wanting to express for a long time. But I also knew that the situation couldn't stay as just a joke. Tyler had made a direct threat against my diner, and that was no longer something I could take lightly. The next day, I decided to visit my lawyer. I explained everything from the beginning: the calls, the persistent messages, Madison's voicemail, and the threat against my business. I also showed him the call logs, screenshots, and the audio where she asked me for money in tears. My lawyer was very clear upon hearing everything. What they were doing could be considered an extortion attempt, and the threats aimed at my business were quite serious. I didn't hesitate. I filed a formal police report and requested a protective order. At the same time, I decided to beef up the diner's security. I hired a private security service, installed additional cameras, and reinforced the entrances. I also spoke with my employees to explain what was happening and asked them to be on the lookout for anything strange. I didn't want to take any risks, neither for myself nor for the people who work with me. The ironic thing about the whole situation is that while I was doing everything possible to protect the business that had cost me so much effort to build, they were probably still thinking of new ways to get money out of me. I say this because a few days later I received another message from an unknown number. From the way it was written, it was clear it came from Tyler. The message said something like, "You're still in time to do the right thing and support Madison. If you don't, face the consequences." That message ended up becoming yet another piece of evidence that I handed directly to my lawyer. With every attempt to manipulate or intimidate me, they were digging a deeper hole for themselves. Personally, I'm not going to deny that this whole situation affected me a lot. It's not easy to accept that the person you fully trusted was capable not only of cheating on you, but also of trying to take advantage of you even after the relationship ended. Funnily enough, what shocked me the most was not the infidelity itself, although obviously that hurts. What really made me reflect was that mentality of dependency she seemed to have. That absurd idea of believing that someone deserves to have another person pay their debts simply because they were together for a while. As for Tyler, his attitude only ended up confirming what I already suspected from the beginning. A man without ambition, without a steady job, and without a shred of dignity, willing to live off of anyone who lets him. Of course I felt anger, but being honest, I also felt some pity, because I truly can't understand how anyone can feel comfortable asking another man for money to support his own partner. To me, that represents the lowest level of mediocrity. Today I can say that I'm not afraid. I'm legally protected, and I also reinforce the security of my diner. If they try to do something, they will have to face the consequences. But beyond all that, I feel that I came out stronger from this whole experience. I learned something very important. Setting boundaries is not being selfish, it's respecting oneself. I also understood that love should not be confused with an obligation. Helping someone is fine as long as that person is also willing to put effort into their own life. What I experienced with Madison and with Tyler was a bitter experience, without a doubt, but it was also necessary to open my eyes. Sometimes I stop to think about the contrast. While I spend my days working, looking for ways to improve my diner and make it grow, they are probably still trying to find someone else they can squeeze money out of. Before, that idea filled me with anger. Now, honestly, it brings me peace, because I keep moving forward while they seem to be trapped in the same place. The supposed love of her life turned out to be a man who can't even pay for his own coffee. And yet, she had the nerve to ask me to keep supporting her. In the end, there is the difference between someone who builds something with effort and someone who simply destroys everything in their path. Today I continue with my life. My diner is stronger than ever. It now has more security, and many regular customers have even shown me their support after everything that happened. Personally, I'm also in a different stage. I'm learning to enjoy my single life, my independence, and the peace of living without unnecessary drama. I know very little about Madison and Tyler. Maybe they are still together, maybe not. But there is one thing I am completely sure of. They will never get a single cent from me again. If anyone reading this could take away a lesson from my story, it would be this. Never let anyone manipulate you using love or guilt to take advantage of you. True love doesn't demand that you pay someone else's debts, nor does it force you to sacrifice your dignity to support someone who doesn't even try to get ahead on their own. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I'm grateful to have understood it now and not later, when the price would have been much higher. Update. As I mentioned before, I decided to take legal action against Madison and Tyler. The report was already filed. I reinforced the diner's security and tried to continue with my life as normally as possible. Even so, there was always a little uneasiness in the back of my head. I didn't know if Tyler was really going to try to carry out the threats he had made. The answer arrived on a night I will never forget. It was Thursday, past midnight. The diner was closed, but we had a night security guard on patrol. I was at home resting after a long day of work, when suddenly my phone started ringing. It was the security guard. He sounded nervous, his voice cracking. "Mr. Jacob, we just caught a man who was trying to spray paint the walls of the diner." I jumped out of bed immediately. "What? Are you sure?" I asked, still in disbelief. "Yes, sir. I saw him with my own eyes. He was about to spray the whole front when I confronted him. I yelled at him to stop, and he ran off. I called the police right away, and they arrived in a few minutes. They chased him for several blocks until they managed to catch him." I took a deep breath before asking the question to which I deep down already knew the answer. "Was it that guy, Tyler?" "Yes, sir. That's what the officers said his name was," he confirmed. I remained silent for a few seconds. I felt a strange mix of anger, relief, and even a certain ironic chuckle. The man who had spent weeks making threats finally tried to carry them out, and he did it with a simple can of spray paint. I hung up the phone, got dressed quickly, and headed to the diner. When I arrived, the patrol car was still parked in front of the place. I approached the officers and confirmed what happened. Tyler had been caught practically red-handed. When the security guard confronted him, he tried to run, but he didn't get very far. The police caught up with him on a nearby street. The guard told me that while confronting him, Tyler was yelling things like, "This place is worthless. If he doesn't pay me, I'm going to ruin his business." With those words, his intention became quite clear. They took him straight to the police station, and that same night, I had to show up to make a formal statement. The extortion case already existed with all the calls and messages I had saved, and now, to top it off, the attempted vandalism was added. Legally, that practically finished sinking him. During the following days, everything was quite hectic. My lawyer kept me informed of every step of the process. Tyler was facing charges for extortion, making criminal threats, and attempted property damage. Even though the material damage didn't fully materialize, the fact that he was caught in the act with the spray can, added to all the previous evidence, left very little room for doubt. Madison, of course, tried to contact me again, not directly, because I already had her blocked everywhere, but she started doing it through mutual acquaintances. She asked them to talk to me, to try to convince me to drop the charges. She said that Tyler didn't deserve to go to jail, that he had acted out of desperation. Even some acquaintances hinted that maybe I was overreacting and that it would be best to just leave the matter as is, but this time I didn't give in. It had reached a point where I had already endured too much. Infidelity, humiliation, blackmail, and threats. Enough was enough. Furthermore, it wasn't my responsibility to forgive something that clearly constituted a crime. If I let all that slide, the message I would send would be that anyone could try to intimidate me or put my work at risk without facing consequences. That couldn't happen. The legal process moved quite fast, and the evidence was overwhelming. Call logs, message screenshots, the voicemail where they asked me for money while threatening me, and finally the attempted vandalism with direct police intervention. Tyler ended up being convicted. It wasn't an extremely long sentence, but it was enough for him to understand that life is not solved by living off others or resorting to threats. He would spend time in jail, and, moreover, he would be left with a criminal record that would affect his future. As for Madison, she was never directly charged. She hadn't executed the threats or the act of vandalism, although her moral involvement was more than evident. I had nothing more to say to her, so I simply left it at that. What did surprise me was her last desperate attempt to appeal to my emotions. One night, I received a very long message from an unknown number. It was Madison. She wrote things like, "Don't you understand what it means for a woman to be left alone? I just wanted someone to support me. If Tyler ends up in jail, I go down with him too." The message ended by begging me to reconsider everything. I read it only once, then I deleted it. I didn't reply. That person is no longer part of my life. And that was how everything finally ended. Today, looking back, I feel enormous relief. For months, I was trapped in a circle of manipulation where my generosity was used as a bargaining chip and my love was confused with an obligation. I thought I was helping someone who really needed it, when in reality, I was only sustaining the comfort of two people incapable of fending for themselves. The diner is still standing and stronger than ever. In fact, when the story started circulating among some customers, something curious happened. Instead of pushing people away, I received even more support. Many congratulated me for not letting myself be intimidated. Some even told me that that firmness reflected the character with which I had built my business. Personally, I learned something very important. It's not all about giving. You also have to know when to stop, because if you don't, you can end up empty, used, and even in danger. I understood that not everyone deserves your help and that love should never demand that you sacrifice your dignity or your principles. Tyler had to face the consequences of his actions. As for Madison, well, she went her own way. I, for my part, chose mine, and although everything I went through left some scars, it also left me with a lesson that is worth much more than any loss. I learned that what one builds with effort, work, and sacrifice must also be defended with one's head held high, without fear, without giving in to blackmail or manipulation. Today I can proudly say that I came out of this whole story stronger than before. I have my diner, I have my peace of mind, and above all, I have peace. A peace that comes from knowing that I was able to permanently close a chapter that should never have started the way it did. That was, in the end, the true closure. And believe me, when I say this, few things feel as good as looking back, remembering everything that happened, and realizing that you didn't end up in the hands of people who only wanted to take advantage of you. Comment. Sharing this story with you all really makes me think about our own journeys. True kindness toward others must always start with kindness toward ourselves. Setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness. Instead, it is the ultimate act of self-respect. We cannot be responsible for the choices others make, but we are always responsible for how we protect our own peace. The path to healing often begins the moment we decide we deserve better. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is choose our own peace over the chaos of a toxic situation. Letting go of what hurts you creates the space for what can heal you. Remember that your value is non-negotiable, and you are the one who sets the terms. I hope you all find the strength to build and protect the life you have worked so hard for. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.